Welcome back to Placeholders, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. This week on the podcast, what does Tadej Pogačar have to do to win the Tour de France? Or specifically, what does he not have to do? What can he not do? How the races were won with Cosmo Catalano. We've got Cosmo on the show today. Shimano's ransomware attack and more. Joining me today, as I just mentioned, Cosmo Catalano. Welcome to Placeholders.
Hello. I think I've been here before, a long time ago, but it's good to be back.
It's been close to a year, probably.
Yeah, around then.
Yeah, we're coming up on. Actually, next week is the 1 year anniversary of Placeholders because November 15th was layoff day last year. Exciting times. Also joining me today, Dane Cash. Welcome back.
You're reminding me that 1 year ago I was like on a beach. So yeah, I need to get to one of those soon.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe we'll do something special for it next week. Let's get into today's show. So over the weekend, we had the Saitama Criterium. It's not really a bike race. It's a fake bike race. It's very entertaining. Johnny wrote a little piece about it for the site. It's good fun. It's all in good fun. You know, you've got Tadej Pogačar out sprinting. Was it Peter Sagan, I think, that they dropped? Sepp Kuss and Tadej Pogačar dropped Peter Sagan to take the victory at the Saitama Criterium. But also, it's an opportunity for some of these riders to kind of chat in a slightly less stressed out environment. So our good friend of the podcast, Gregor Brown, had a chat with Pogačar over the weekend. Stuck it up on the Flow Bikes YouTube. Dane, what did he say?
Well, he said a lot of things. It's like 10-minute chat. One of the more interesting things that came out of that chat was something that I think we kind of already knew a little bit because of the way that Tadej Pogačar has sort of structured his last two seasons. Basically, the long story short is that he likes doing the various challenges that include the Tour of Flanders and the Ardennes races, Lombardia. He said, quote, "It's not ideal, but it's what I like." You know, I think we knew that, obviously, because that's why he does them. But he just seemed to acknowledge that this is probably something that is probably not perfect for his Tour de France prep. And we've seen in the last 2 years that a rider who I honestly think looked unbeatable 2 years ago. Tadej Pogačar, to me, looked unbeatable before Jonas Vingegaard came onto the scene. Well, now there's this question of, well, does Tadej Pogačar have a chance of winning the Tour if he's still focusing on all of these other things, classics and apparently Worlds next year? The main point of it is he's not going to change. That's just what he likes to do. I think the rest of us benefit from that, by the way. And that's just what he's going to do.
He said roughly the same thing in the second place press conference at the end of the Tour de France this year. It made me slightly concerned because he basically came up and said, well, yeah, I always try to set these big goals. Those big goals include more than just the Tour de France, and I'm not sure if that's the way forward, basically what he said. And he kind of reiterated that in the chat with Gregor this weekend. Do we feel like he has to go all, Team Sky, Chris Froome, can't race anything but the Tour de France if he's going to win it? Does he have to do that at this point? Is that where the sport is?
I would say no. Finally, maybe, possibly, the sport is moving away from that, where you can have riders that are, yeah, they could potentially win the Tour de France, but there is value in being somebody who's fun and interesting to watch and goes out and just shows up at Tour of Flanders and wins, almost, but not quite on a whim. I think that is really more marketable than, oh, hey, won the Tour de France. Like, somebody wins the Tour de France every year. It's usually not very interesting the way they do it. Whereas, one-day racing is so hell-bent and weird and things happen. A horse got out at Strade Bianca last year in front of Demi Vollering. Like, that's stuff that I guess sometimes happens at the Tour de France because everything in a one-day race happens like at the most important part of the race, or at least on the day where things are the most important. You get a lot of this cool stuff that will resonate more with people. Like I think they kind of blew it with Pogačar on Unchained last year, where they tried to make him this like villainous Terminator, can't beat him kind of guy when he is the complete exact opposite. And I'm wondering how they'll handle him this time around because he has that, I think, what I think is an underrated marketability, and really only geeky cycling fans know about it right now.
I do think it helps that he has already won 2 tours. By definition, this will already not be something that's like a white whale for the rest of his career. He's already got 2 Tours de France in the bag. I mean, he already won one of the most like wildly entertaining time trials any of us have ever seen when he overhauled Primož Roglič, and then he dominated the next year. So now at this point, I think it is okay for him to focus on some of these other things. And then maybe to the point of like, can he win the Tour de France if he keeps racing this way? I think the answer is yes. I think he may always be at a disadvantage, but even the most dominant riders in their very dominant periods crash, have bad days. They get sick. Like Jonas Vingegaard is really strong, but I don't think he's going to be invincible. And we saw Chris Froome didn't win 5 tours in a row. He won 4 tours in 5 years because there was that one year where he broke bones in both hands, I think. I mean, that happens. And I think Pogačar might be able to take another tour win or two if Vingegaard just has a bad day.
But what you're saying is basically that the only way he's going to win a tour again, if he continues to race the way that he's racing, is if Vingegaard falters, as opposed to Pogačar just being the better of the two bike racers. So I guess my question is, if Pogačar took the Vingegaard route, right, where, I think Vingegaard raced like 6 races this entire year. He won 4 or 5 of them, and some of them are 1 week stage races, so that, it's a decent number of race days, but quite few actual races. If Pogačar took that pathway, is he the better Tour de France rider? And so is he essentially is he lopping 5% off of his peak because he does all these other things? And so therefore the only way that he wins is, again, if Vingegaard falters.
I don't know. I think the Tour de France, as it tends to be constructed, gives Pogačar more opportunity to falter than Vingegaard. And I think it is not inconceivable that a Tour de France route might exist where there is more opportunity, or at least a more equal opportunity, for them both to have bad days. Short little time trial with a lot of climbing in it versus a tight technical urban time trial could have made all the difference last year. Like that, yes, there was the big collapse in the mountains the next day, but where we really saw the gap open was that silly little TT. Maybe just don't have that TT. Maybe make the mountains
I'm in favor of that.
More explosive and less kind of grindy and watts over mass E. But yeah, I mean, I think, yes, there is a certain sacrifice, but I think it is not necessarily going to derail Pogačar's Tour de France. Like, I think Tour de France courses exist where there isn't as much disadvantage as there can be historically.
Another maybe element of that is sort of funny to say because of how much they've both already achieved, particularly Pogačar, but he just turned 25. Like, we don't really know what is, hypothetically, I mean, based on everything we used to think we knew about physiology, he still has years to go before he reaches that peak of physical form. And like, what is that going to look like? We have no idea. I mean, this is a rider who has already achieved so much at his very young age. He just left young rider status at the Tour de France. Got to wear that jersey at Saitama. And what is he going to look like in 2 or 3 years? Who knows? Maybe he's significantly better. Maybe not. Hard to say.
I don't want to spend too much time on this one here, but I do want to ask the big question, which is what he's doing now worth it? And Cosmo, you kind of answered this right at the start here, but is the chasing one days, is chasing Flanders, is chasing Lombardia again, and potentially crashing in the lead up to the Tour and things like that, is that worth coming in second at the Tour for the next couple of years? Is that worth it?
I think so, but I'm weird.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, to me, the answer is unequivocally yes, but like the Tour of Flanders is my favorite bike race. So that, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I want him to go race those races. And again, I do think the fact that he's already won 2 Tours de France makes a difference. So he maybe can do this without having in the back of his mind, I must win a Tour before I retire.
What's interesting is, ultimately that question is answered by the sponsors, right? By the team. I feel like the tourism board or whatever of the United Arab Emirates is looking at this rounding error they have assigned to their pro cycling team and being like, who cares? And whereas, Jumbo is like, hey, we spent a lot of money on your team and we don't think we're getting any value for it, so we're going to leave. So there may actually be very different pressure from a business standpoint from these 2 different teams and sponsors. Vingegaard has to win the Tour because that's where the value is, whereas UAE is just kind of like maybe a bit more hands off in terms of how their money is spent because they've got a lot to spend. And there is a goofiness to a Pogačar Instagram reel that you can send to a suit who shows it to his teenage son. Is like, yeah, that's cool. And you maybe don't get that with Jonas Vingegaard.
Any final thoughts, Dane?
I do wonder if Vingegaard, he is also relatively young. And if he maybe develops that, Primož Roglič, late era Primož Roglič has gotten cooler. Maybe Vingegaard, maybe that's in Vingegaard's future.
Do you really? He seems like he's already like a 40-year-old dad. Like he's there with like, he's like, I'm going to hug my kid.
Be cool, Cosmo. There's 2 on this call.
I can see him walking around his house, like turning off the lights and checking the thermostat to make sure no one's turned it up too high.
I did that this morning. I think Vingegaard is extremely nice. I think he is like a kind human being. Oof. I think we saw a bit of that actually at the Vuelta this year with the whole Sepp Kuss situation. Like, I think he was the nicer of the 2 teammates, right? But I'm not sure about cool. I think cool might be well outside his repertoire at the moment. You never know. He could grow into coolness, buy a leather jacket. I don't know what he could do. Something like that. Anyway, we're a long way from the Tour de France, but we like that little interview. Bring a little bit of Tour and Pogačar into an off-season pod, and well done to Gregor for sitting down with Tadej himself. And it's just an interesting thing to think about because, these bigger questions, they do end up they end up kind of defining seasons, I think, because what Pogačar decides to go do affects a lot of other things because he tends to win almost anything that he's going to set his mind to. But now, let's take a quick break. Welcome back. We're going to talk cross. We're going to talk cyclocross because it is cyclocross season. Cosmo, you mentioned something off air about how there's just a lot of speculation at this point in time, at this point in the cross season, because frankly, a lot of the big names haven't even really shown up yet. And it seems to be a trend in cross, right? So where do we kind of stand? Where does the season stand right now? And who are the interesting names that have cropped up?
Well, we should just give the audience a few seconds to stop clapping because they get to hear Cosmo talk about cross, and they've been. I mean, if Discord is any indication,
they want this.
They want this.
Talking about cyclocross in front of Dane and Caley, who at times fail to acknowledge its existence.
I will try not to fall asleep.
Oof,
man. Hey, you know what? There have been some very competitive races, very entertaining. A lot of team tactics. You've ended up with Powell Sauce's bingo and Trek Balois Lions having legit, like, fun to watch tactical team battles. A lot of guys kind of going for it and messing up because they know they have teammates behind who can help clean up the mess. It's been fun to see. The problem is that, everybody in the back of their minds knows that the top riders in cyclocross, who happen to be some of the top riders in cycling as a whole, aren't there yet. And so there's a lot of, they're having a good season, but what would happen if Pidcock were here? Van Aert were here, Van der Poel were here. And there's a lot of, it almost feels like in the US, there's a big thing where all the high school athletes announce what college they're going to attend. And you can see like Van der Poel just announced his cyclocross schedule. And it's a big, like, we thought he was going to do these races, but here are the World Cups he's doing. And maybe he'll appear at this Super Prestige and this Bad Cameras Trophy. And it's just there is a lot of kind of speculative storylines, just media energy, fan energy behind where are they going to show up and how are they going to ride once they do.
Is there anybody floating around right now who's been like winning the races thus far who could conceivably compete with these guys and gals? Like I'm talking like Pauline Ferrand-Prévot is another perfect example of somebody who tends to like show up for Worlds and just do that, right?
Fem Van Empel is on the women's side destroying everybody. She looks better than she looked last year, which is saying something. She's always been really strong, but there's a certain just perfection in how she's been riding so far. She did go head to head with Puck Pieterse in the first World Cup of the year, and Pieterse didn't look bad, but she did look like someone who'd been riding a mountain bike for 8 months. There's a certain lack of souplesse, a lot of just kind of powering through lines. You would see a couple of times kind of in the early going, they were together for the first 3 or 4 laps where, Van Empel would kind of cruise through a corner on like a very cyclocrossy line, kind of wide, carrying speed. It looks like it's slower, but it's definitely faster. And she'd turn around and look over her shoulder, and there'd be a 3-rider gap to Pieterse, who'd taken a shorter line. This sort of repeated, and Pieterse would fight her way back until finally the errors Pieterse was making, I think she bobbled on some steps, just added up. But yeah, she's looked really good. I think she could go toe-to-toe with anybody. Pieterse and Shirin Van Anrooy, Lucinda Brons coming back this week. So that looks like we're seeing the best rider in the world, but not racing against the other potential contenders. On the men's side, I think we really are missing the top names. The only question there is Thibaut Nys, who is very young, son of the great Sven Nys. He has been in the mix fighting for wins, but he has been a little constrained tactically sometimes. He's been very polite about it. Lars van der Haar won a World Cup, I believe, and he said, I was riding within myself because I had to let Lars, he's up front of them, I'm not going to chase him down. That said, Thibaut has looked like he was definitely the strongest in a couple of races and kind of crashed himself out of contention. He's got a real Ricky Bobby aspect to his riding. There's kind of a real stereotype, like you're seeing a cyclocross rider. It's slippery, it's muddy, they're in a rut. They have one foot unclipped, just in case they slide. And Nys doesn't do that. He is fully clipped in, like gripping the handlebars, locked into the pedal so he can get that pedal stroke a quarter second faster coming out of the rut. And sometimes it works and it's amazing. And you're like, this is a superhuman being. And other times he crashes and loses 12 seconds. And you're like, why didn't you just take your foot out of the pedal, kid? So that's kind of what we're seeing. And I think it will be interesting to see what he does when he gets, lined up against a Van Aert, against a Van der Poel, against a Tom Pidcock, who are arguably at that level of power and bike handling, to see if he can really throw down with them, because, they're not going to wait for Lars van der Haar. If Lars van der Haar is up the course, they're going to chase him down, and Nys is going to go with him. So that, I think, is what a lot of people are looking for.
How old is he now?
I want to say he's 19, but maybe 20. I have to look it up.
He's pretty exciting. I mean, he's the one that keeps showing up like on my social media feeds doing crazy things, riding up
absolutely crazy
ridiculous
stuff.
Hills and just things that no one else is doing. That's pretty exciting.
He is thoughtful about it. Like there's an intelligence. Like he will let the race evolve, and then he'll bust out like, oh, by the way, I can ride this run up that you're all dismounting for, and he'll do that, with 2 laps to go and give himself instant 10-second advantage. So he's not like, I don't want to make it sound like he's reckless, but he definitely he uses his technical skills as hard as he can. He just maybe misaligns the risk versus reward in certain situations.
Any other storylines from Cross we need to keep an eye on?
Cameron Mason has kind of been the underground story. He's still starting in the 3rd row, which is something people miss. And he kind of 40 minutes into the race has a way of just sort of appearing at the back of the lead group. And obviously there's a lot of racing that goes into that. A lot of smart racing. He usually tends to, he'll be toward the front of the group he's riding with. He had a huge race at Euros where he came in 2nd. That was a pretty tactical race. There was a lot of, Belgian kits at the front of it. And they basically sent Michael Van Toorn out up the road, up the course, and he is extremely good at riding in the mud. Like there's a lot of, you talking about Thibaut Nace not bringing his foot out and then crashing. Van Toorn is the master of like taking it just past the slipping point and sort of dabbing or correcting and getting himself back upright. Lars van der Haar had a chance to bring him back at Euros and just crashed a couple of times, but Mason did a really good job first trying to motivate people to go get Van Toorn out, and then kind of afterwards realizing that it was now a race for 2nd. Being real smart, really judicious about his efforts and kind of powering home for 2nd. The first non-Belgian, non-Netherlands rider to be on a podium at European Cyclocross Championships, I believe, male rider to do that. So yeah, really solid season, and he's only going to get better as he starts moving up the grid.
He's Scottish?
He is Scottish. He races for the UK. I don't know if there is a Scottish national champions kit, but probably cooler.
No one knows what's going on over there.
It is very strange.
So Cosmo, I might not be a cross expert, but I do know that we don't usually wrap number plates around the head tubes of our cyclocross bikes, which is what we saw at Pan Am's over the weekend. What on earth? Why? Like, did they give them like an extra shoulder one to stick on the front? Like, what? Do they want to emulate gravel racing? Like, what are we doing here?
I feel bad because this was something that the internet, and I played a role in this and also feel bad about it, that the internet kind of latched onto immediately because it's very visually obvious. But the event as a whole was really well run. It was really, the course was great. The thing is, they were a mountain biking organization, I guess, is what I've heard. And so they had timing chips on number plates that went ostensibly on the front handlebars of mountain bikes. It sort of translates to cross, except that you have to occasionally change bikes. So I guess everybody got 2 number plates, but sometimes you got more than 2 bikes in use. And also there's the question of where do you put it? Some of them were like super glued to head tubes. Some of them were around handlebars. Some of them were around handlebars, but there was a Garmin in the way, which doesn't entirely make sense if you're switching bikes. But it just felt very unusual, and it does look a little silly. But again, the event as a whole seemed like it was great. But yeah, a little moment of levity for cycling fans on the internet.
I enjoyed it. All right. I think that's our cross update. Cosmo, we will have you back to talk more cross. It needs to happen. Now that we've done sort of a big, broad, where are we in the season, next time we have you on, we can talk in maybe some more specifics. Maybe we can find out how the race was won, for example. But it's time to move on.
Okay.
Take a quick break. Welcome back. Time for today's news hits. There's a fair amount that's going on in the bicycle world, even though we're in the sort of the off season of professional road racing. Let's kick off with one of my favorite headlines we've had on the website recently. Dutch headwind world champs canceled for headwinds. Dane, this is gonna be a very short segment, but why? What happened? What's the event? Let's explain this.
I mean, it is what it sounds like. You ride a bike into headwinds, and they're riding like not aero road bikes into headwinds.
Like upright Dutch bikes.
Yes, they are riding the bikes that you would see them riding around town in. City bike, town bikes. I don't know. Yeah.
Dutch bikes.
And they go as fast as they can into like this really heavy headwind. And it's great. It's a blast to watch. This year, unfortunately for the organizers and anybody who wanted to do this thing, Storm Ciarán was happening at this time. The storm brought headwinds that were maybe a little bit too aggressive for the headwind national champion, headwind championships, which maybe isn't all that surprising. But it did give us the opportunity to run that spectacular headline. They canceled the headwind championships because of the headwind. But yeah, I mean, it's probably the safer call, the safe thing to do to not ride into that.
So sometimes this event doesn't happen because there's not enough headwind. They have to like wait around for a bit of a storm because I think they need like 50K plus is what they shoot for. So they kind of like wait for the forecast around this time of year and they're like, this weekend looks like it's going to be windy. This is it. Bust out your Dutch upright bikes. We're going to the coast. We're going to go ride across some big dam things and see how slow we can go. But this year, yeah, unfortunately, I think that storm had like 110 kilometer per hour winds or something like that. Like it was enough. There were things popping up on social media of people just riding around like Amsterdam and literally getting blown off of their bicycles. So it's probably a good idea that this thing got canceled. It is an event that next year I want to send somebody to because it sounds like just a huge amount of fun.
Ronan can optimize for it. I feel like that could be a thing.
I think the whole point is that you don't optimize.
Yeah, that would be frowned upon.
That's very much the
non-optimization.
Yeah. I mean, you're on like a 45-pound steel bike with handlebars a foot above the saddle, and it's not quite Ronin material. Although you never know. I would love to see Ronin go out with his little arrow dongle and try to figure out how to improve his upright Dutch riding CDA. I could see him trying to do that. Next in our list of news here, Shimano appears to have been hit with a ransomware attack. We actually don't know how this is resolved because I believe that the deadline for it was yesterday, Monday. But the hackers are claiming that they have like 4.5 terabytes of information, including employee passports and a whole bunch of other bad things. It doesn't sound like they have any significant, Shimano doesn't have any significant information on customers generally. But there is, there's a fair amount of like financial data in there. There's a whole bunch of things that Shimano definitely does not want released.
My mind immediately turns to cranks falling apart and whether or not there's material here that's going to change their crank falling apart settlement that was like a decade in the making. And I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it's actually, if there's in these terabytes of information, a 300 email thread about all these cranks breaking and what should we do about it from 10 years ago, it's going to look really bad when it comes out because the UK, right, rejected the settlement. Wasn't that what happened? There was some weird thing where they did a settlement and they're like, and this will be fine. But then the UK rejected it. And then there's potentially a lot of money coming out of Shimano to make up for the fact that a lot of their cranks failed. I think this complicates it substantially.
Yeah, and if you don't know what we're talking about there, they've talked about this a fair amount on Geek Warning over the weeks. But basically, the Shimano finally came out and at first did sort of a partial recall, or it wasn't actually called a recall, and they had to do a recall because basically the bonding on some of their aluminum cranksets, particularly I think the Ultegra and Dura-Ace ones, was unbonding, and the cranks would fall apart while you were riding them, and some people hurt themselves, and it was not a good scene. It is a very, very, very small percentage of the total cranks that were made, I should say.
Yes.
For, lawyers, but it is still they sell a lot of cranks.
And
there's even a very small percentage is a lot of cranks out there. And yeah, it was sort of like this weird, it floated around the internet for a very long time because people kept sending these photos. Like, James and I would get these photos in our inboxes. Like, I got another broken crank here, particularly from folks in shops. And Shimano kind of refused to address it for a very long time, probably for legal reasons. And then finally was forced to. And as you say, Cosmo, we don't know if there's any information in this hack that would be related to that. But if they have emails, if they have background on this, that is stuff that might be interesting as part of a discovery process in a court case. So that's one angle on this. And then of course the other is just like all the privacy concerns around, if I was a Shimano employee and my passport scan was now in the hands of hackers, I would be less than pleased. So we'll keep an eye on this story and we will update you as we get more. Again, the deadline for that has passed, so I don't know if the stuff's released or not just yet. Couple other little bits here. I wanted to mention this. Carmen Small, who was a director over at the Jumbo-Visma women's team up until I think like mid-season last year, has moved over to be the head sports director at the new look EF women's team, which I will remind everybody is a new team. It's no longer run by the same people. It's now owned by EF itself, much like the men's team is, and they're kind of rebuilding that thing from scratch. And they pulled in Carmen, who is a superb sport director, former pro, multi-time U.S. national time trial champion, and all-around good person. So it's good to see her land over at EF, and I think that'll be great for that program. Next on my list here, Dane, I feel sad, awkward. I don't like when Chris Froome has another excuse. What is his latest excuse? or
right, I
not
don't
being
like
the
dunking
Chris
on
Froome
Chris
that he
Froome.
used to be.
So let's preface it with that.
We're not dunking it. We're not dunk. He's dunking on himself.
on himself.
He is dunking on himself. Like I said, it makes me sad. This makes me sad because he's like one of the greatest cyclists of the last couple decades.
He really is.
And now I have to wonder whether he understands the difference between a long nose saddle and a short nose saddle, between his Pinarello and his current Factor.
I do think, he's 38 years old. He never really recovered from his horrible crash in terms of getting his results back. But if you are a professional athlete, like, it's not that surprising if you have a constant sense in your mind that you can still achieve greatness no matter what. I mean, we see this with sprinters all the time. I think this is not that surprising from Chris Froome, but Chris Froome still seems to think he can achieve greatness. And you know what? I get no problem if that's what his mind is telling him. Keep going for it. According to Chris Froome, he just discovered relatively recently that his bike setup for the past several years while racing with Israel Premier Tech was actually several centimeters off from what it was during his Sky days when he was winning all those Tours de France. I think he said 3 centimeters difference of his reach, which is one of the key measurements people use to, along with stack, to like size bikes even across different frame types. Yeah, so he said that he just discovered this and he's made it a change, and maybe that was the cause of some of his back pain. I mean, that aspect in and of itself, like, that seems reasonable. I don't think that necessarily would explain like why he's not great, but it could be something. I mean, I think the context here is that this is like the 8th or 9th thing he's pointed to. If it had been the 1st or 2nd thing, we would have said, okay, that's interesting. Anyway, he's changed his bike fit a little bit, so maybe he'll win some races next year. Maybe.
Probably not.
I have so many feelings about this because Jose Bain posted on the Escape Slack that there's content of his fitting session for the 2022 season where he's there with the team techs working on the bike, being like, yeah, this is great. I love to do this all the time, twice a season. And clearly there are people paying attention and fitting him on this bike. So I don't quite understand, one, how this wasn't the best possible fit. Because two, like, if you put me on a bike from 10 years ago, I'm going to be like, this is kind of a weird fit. People change their bike positions all the time as they get older, especially if they get seriously injured. The praying Landis position was something that I'm thinking of, where it's just like your body changes and you got to figure out the best way to get the watts with the least drag. And I don't know that going back to the bike you had when you were in your prime and being like, oh, this is centimeters off. Clearly the people who set me up on my most recent bike messed up. I don't think that holds water from a performance point of view.
It absolutely doesn't. And it also, like, there's just some bits of it that don't really make any sense. Like, he's talking about a reach change of like 3 centimeters or something like that. Like, you would notice that.
Yeah.
Like, you would 3 centimeters. You would, like, you're talking about going from a 90 mil stem to a 120 stem and not noticing. Like, I just, there are plenty of amateurs out there that would notice that. I would certainly notice that. Chris Froome should notice that. And it makes me wonder, like I said, I kind of hinted at this at the beginning. Did he just change saddles, and is he measuring from the front of the saddle? Because, for example, if you get a new Specialized power saddle, your sit bones in relation to the nose of that saddle are significantly closer together, right? Than they would be if you're on like I don't know, old Physique Arione or something like that. Which, if you measured from the front of the saddle to the handlebars, you would think that the saddle was closer to the handlebars than it actually is, right? But the sit bones to the sit bone to handlebar relationship remains unchanged. So that's the only thing I can think of, is that like he something simple and stupid like that, because there's absolutely no way that you've got a 3 centimeter change in, I think, multiple directions. He said it was like a saddle height and total reach were the issues. There's just no way. There's no way.
In his defense, if he went back into his like Chris Froome Ferrari garage, the Chris Froome equivalent of a Ferrari garage, and pulled his 2014 Pinarello off the wall and got on it and said, whoa, this is 3 centimeters different, I could believe that, because taking those 3 centimeters and dividing that over 10 years, like, you could definitely feel that sort of progressive change and not notice it one day to the next. And then going from the bike from now to the bike from then, having it be a 3 centimeter difference, that's not completely outside the realm of possibility for me. But again, I don't know that is a good metric for determining your bike fit, was grabbing the bike you had when you were 26 and in the best shape of your life.
I'm going to make a point, but first I'll say that I have no problem with Chris Froome continuing to try to trying to reach those old heights. Why not? He's getting paid lots of money to do it. However, there was a really great quote from this interview where he said, he started off by saying, "At first, I thought it was age starting to catch up with me, but then I started questioning my position actually on the bike, blah, blah, blah." So it's like he had that thought. He's maybe coming around to that. But no, not yet. Hasn't reached that conclusion that all of us have already reached. Yeah, but he's at least starting to get there. So maybe another year of a lack of results with his team owner publicly criticizing him will get him to that conclusion. Or maybe the bike change will see him sailing to new heights, crushing Jonas Vingegaard at the Tour de France.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had a bunch of bike fits and they do change things, right? And I agree with Cosmo that you could, like, over the years, you could end up with quite a different total reach figure than before. And it could be better or worse. Like, I've also had bike fits that put me in a position from good bike fitters who were doing their best that put me in a position that didn't work for me. And I ended up having pain that I didn't used to have, right? So, like, these are all conceivable, possible things. I just struggle with sort of the specifics of this one. And it just starts to not really line up. Anyway, we wish Chris Froome the best. We genuinely do. That's why it kind of makes me bummed out and sad that this stuff keeps popping up, is like, I want him to finish his career in the way that he wants to finish it. I want that for him, right? And that's not really happening at the moment. So fingers crossed, this is what does it. And, we're just misunderstanding something in the numbers that he's put out, because that doesn't really make much sense. Let's hope it's on us and not on him. We have a couple more things to chat through. Dane, did you want to talk about Nathan Van Hooydonk's heart?
Yes, although I think the main point of this sort of news nugget is that he is still uncertain of exactly what caused his enlarged heart. And it's interesting as part of a broader conversation, too. We have seen a number of elite athletes, tons of them in the cycling world, having heart issues. Riders who, from the outside, you might assume, like, oh, they have the healthiest hearts out there. But they have... We have seen a number of athletes like Nathan Van Hooydonk who have relatively rapidly developed these heart issues. And in his case, it's an enlarged heart. It's an arrhythmia that led to essentially the incident. He had a serious health incident involving his heart while he was behind the wheel of a car driving around with his wife in the car, just not nothing to do with bike racing, and happened to be involved in a serious crash, and then he made the decision to retire because it's basically it's not safe to be riding in a peloton when you might all of a sudden find yourself unable to operate your bike. But yeah, the sort of the crux of what he recently said in an interview was that still trying to figure out why he developed this heart condition. Elite athlete, relatively young man. The possible explanation that he was considering, he said, quote, "Maybe I trained too hard," but I don't think that is the reason. A lot of uncertainty around that, why this would have happened, and it's something that is important, obviously, to him, but also to cyclists in general, who you don't want an enlarged heart ventricle. That's not a good thing. And we do this. No. We cycle with thinking that it's a very healthy thing, and yet this happens as well to some elite athletes.
Yeah, I think I mentioned previously, like I've had arrhythmia stuff, particularly post-COVID. Seems to have waned because I haven't had COVID for about a year. Hopefully recovered. Like that, there's been quite a few riders who had COVID, and then basically, like, doctors told them don't ride for a while until you sort of fully recover. It manifests itself in lots of different scary ways, or it could be something completely different. But the fact that we have all these incidents shortly after a pandemic that appears to have affected people's hearts, I don't think that is all just coincidence. Probably. And it is something that we're digging into deeper. Like, this is a topic that I think interests us and probably interests a lot of folks out there. And so we are working on some stories on this front, not to provide any sort of conclusions, not to provide any real conclusions, but to just look at it and ask the questions and talk to the people who may actually know what's going on here. So keep an eye out for those on Escape Collective over the sort of coming weeks and months. Last on the list here, Michał Kwiatkowski ran the New York Marathon, Cosmo.
Yeah, said it was a bucket list thing. I don't think he ran it with his wife or partner, I think. And so, he 4:10 was the finishing time, which is not, I feel like he could probably go faster if he were trying to go as fast as he possibly could. I like watching cyclists do non-cycling things. I like watching them having fun doing them, which it appears he did. I don't know that I could have fun running through New York City for 4 hours plus, but it's good to see that he could. And yeah, like it's a nice way to kind of show that additional, like Jonas Vingegaard probably not going to run the New York City Marathon. But Kwiatkowski, he's won a Tour de France stage. this year, and he's out there doing stuff in the offseason, getting eyeballs, relatable eyeballs, and having a good time doing it.
He's just a really nice guy, too. I've chatted with him a couple different times. Former world champ. He's very humble, kind of quiet, really nice guy. Good to see him off in New York having some fun. I wonder how much he trained for it. I mean, like, he hasn't raced for a little bit here, but, you know, the season's not that far behind us. I guess when you're that fit and you're running a 4-hour marathon, which, as you say, you could probably run an hour plus faster than that if you really wanted to, right? He probably just had to go out and run for 6 weeks and try not to get injured. It's probably all he had to do. Because I've seen, like, I think was it Ben King a couple years ago who just in the off season just literally got off the couch, like straight from riding, and just ran a marathon in like 3 hours. I think that was him.
I believe it. I mean, some of the women's cross-country ski team, U.S. cross-country ski team, showed up in Boston on minimal training, and all were like 3 hours. Some of them were, I think Liz Stevens was sub 3 or something. And like,
wow.
They're like, yeah, we were really sore afterwards because we didn't have any road miles. And I'm like, can we back up?
Yeah.
Like,
just go run. I'm pretty sure it was Ben, and I'm pretty sure that he said afterwards that he basically couldn't move for like a week.
Yeah,
which,
bet.
like, if it's basically that's not too surprising. All right, well that's it for our news today. Last but not least, let's get into some weekly pain. All right, so Cosmo, this is your opportunity to get on the board for the first time. Very exciting. Cosmo versus Dane. We're also going to run, for the first time ever, our member call-in quiz. So we're going to do a quick one-question quiz with Cosmo and Dane, and then we're going to see if our member can take on either Dane or Ronan right after. All right, Cosmo, Dane, this is a game of categories. They tend to be the easiest, I think, to run through. There are only 6 answers in this game of categories, one of which we've already mentioned, so that one does not count. Your category is, and I'm going to start with Dane here, and then, of course, the rules are you go back and forth until somebody cannot provide me an answer. I do have a backup, provided we get to the very end, you get all of them, but I very much doubt we're going to do that. So your category is, there have been 6 winners of the Saitama Criterium. Please name the winners of the Saitama Criterium. Cosmo, you get to go first, because we're trying to get you on the board.
I am going to say Chris Froome.
Incorrect. Dane, if you get this one right, you are.
It's a really good thing Cosmo went first. I was thinking that name. But also, wait, so one name is not allowed?
Well, because
we already mentioned earlier in the show that Tadej Pogačar won this year's Saitama Criterium.
Okay, got it. Because we also mentioned Chris Froome, so that's why okay. All right. I don't even know how long the thing's been around.
We got 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and then it came back last year, and then this year.
Egan Bernal.
Nope.
Can I guess again?
Right.
Can I guess? Can we guess still?
Yeah, we could just say first one to get one.
Vincenzo Nibali.
Nope.
Amazing. Peter Sagan.
Peter Sagan won the inaugural.
That was my
Peter
next
Sagan.
guess. That was my next guess.
Yeah. Cosmo, if you can get one, we'll split the points here.
Mark Cavendish.
Yes,
nice.
2017.
Nice.
Well done. All right, so you guys, it's a draw between the two. Cosmo, you are on the board. You get 1 point. Dane, you get 1 point. The other answers, of course, were Jasper Philipsen last year. Yukiya Arashiro.
Oh, of course.
The hometown hero.
Yeah.
Fought valiantly for the win in 2019. And Alejandro Valverde in 2018.
Oh, I never would have guessed. I mean, it just happened last year, but I did not remember that Philipsen had won it. I never would have guessed him. I would have gone through like 100 names.
Well, congratulations to both of you. You split the points. It's a draw, 1 point each.
I can't believe they dressed Froome up like a sumo and didn't give him the victory. That's what I think of when I think of Saitama, is Chris Froome doing sumo. He's the inverse of a sumo wrestler in terms of physiotype, right? So
he probably came in second or third, right? I'm sure he's had a podium.
I bet his bike fit would be different if he were a sumo wrestler.
All right, you guys are a draw. Let's head over to our first ever live Weekly Pain. We've been promising this for how long, Dane? Like
at least a month, probably more.
At least a month, probably more. That we would bring on a listener, a member, to come and challenge one of us. And we have such an individual today. Jesse Jardim, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great, thank you. A little intimidated to be the first one.
You did sign up, though, so that's kind of your own fault.
I barely remember doing it. I just thought it'd be fun to sign up, and here I am.
So Jesse has challenged Ronan today. We also have a piece of factoid, a Jesse factoid that we're going to be bringing out every time we bring somebody on the show. So Jesse has a piece of gravel stuck under a road rash scar on your left shoulder that has not stopped itching since a crash 5 years ago. Is that distracting, Jesse? Is that going to hinder your ability in these quizzes today?
Maybe a little bit. Listeners can't see me, but I am constantly reaching over and scratching my left shoulder every day, all the time.
Is there a medical procedure that could perhaps fix this particular problem, or are you just sort of resigned to your fate?
There probably is, but also I'm resigned to my fate. There's probably a lot of medical procedures that could help me, but I don't care enough to do them.
If you do poorly, you can blame that. And if you succeed, then we can, really make fun of Ronan because you were not at 100%,
I think if that was me for 5 years at this point, I'd have a steak knife out and just cutting the damn thing out.
Save some grams.
All right. So here are the rules. The games are going to be roughly the same as what we always play. We'll play categories. We'll play a bit of like Price is Right. We've got a couple different things. We've got lots of different topics. We've got like some tech and some racing all over the place. But it's going to be single elimination. So Jesse has challenged Ronan. We'll play a single game here. If Ronan wins, Jesse's out. Sorry, Jesse, you're out. Then we'll move on to the next listener/member. If Jesse wins, no real jeopardy for Ronan, to be perfectly honest. But except for the fact that he has to keep playing. So Jesse can then challenge Dane or challenge Ronan again, or, well, he can't challenge me because I made the quiz. But
and notice how Caley
keep going,
insulates himself from the jeopardy here. Smart is what it is.
I think we should have quiz
Strategic,
questions
right?
of our own that if the listener does challenge you, Caley, we can do that.
All right, next time we'll do that. You guys have some quiz questions ready, and if they want to challenge me, they can do that. Nobody has any idea whether I'm any good at this because I never get to actually play. Anyway, that's how this is going to work. Single elimination. What was the term you used, Ronan?
Sudden death?
Sudden death. That's the other way to think about it. We'll get right into it. So, round 1, Jesse versus Ronan.
Let's do it.
I should say most of these quizzes just come from like other things that I happen to be researching, and I just pull them out, and I'm like, that would be fun. So today, I happen to recently be looking at...
You might have to edit this out, but I thought you were going to say you were recently looking at dildos.
If you read my saddle story from yesterday, then you will know what Ronan's talking about. But that is not true. Although I could have done a quiz about weird saddles, because I did uncover quite a few on that front. Yeah. No. So our first game today, this is a game of categories. We considered maybe calling this Ronan's favorite game. Maybe we'll call it Ronan's favorite game going forward. This is vaguely tech related, and so Ronan, you may have a bit of an advantage. However, it's recent enough. I think everybody's going to get a bunch of. Your category is bicycle frame brands that were used in the 2020 Tour de France.
Okay, I know some of these.
That's a good category. I like this category.
Jesse, let's kick off with you. Can you give me a frame brand that was used in the 2020 Tour?
Sure. Let's go with Cervelo.
Cervelo was in there with Team Sunweb back then. Ronan?
Specialized?
Specialized was in there, of course, with actually 2 teams, Koenig Quickstep and Bora Hansgrohe.
Bianchi
with Jumbo Visma. Well done. That one's out now, so 2020. Ronan?
Colnago?
Colnago was in with UAE.
Trek
was in with Trek.
Pinarello?
Pinarello was in with Ineos Grenadiers. I wonder if we're going to get all of these, actually. There's some weird ones, so maybe not.
BMC.
Well done. We're getting down to it now.
I'm considering, do I go for a risky one? It's like there are brands there that were in and out of teams. Scott
was in with Mitchelton Scott that year. Jesse, back to you.
Cannondale.
Yep.
Nice.
EF. Ronan.
I'm gonna go KTM.
No KTM. All right, Jesse.
Wow.
If you get one, you're the champion.
Let's see. Giant.
Correct.
Well done.
CCC.
Well done.
That was tight. That was close.
What did we miss?
We missed Merida, Factor, and Willier Tristina with Astana.
I was hoping.
Yeah.
I wasn't hoping, but I was waiting for someone to say Argon 18 because that is the year that they left. And Willier.
That was what tripped me up. I didn't know. I knew that Jaco hadn't yet started on Giants, and I was like, "Where Giant there that year?"
Well, in 2020 was the weird late tour year, and it was just confusing in general. Well, Jesse, that means you stay on.
Wow.
However, the way that we're going to work this is you're going to come back next week to challenge somebody, and You can pick Ronan, you can pick Dane, whoever you want. Well done. Congratulations. Throw some applause.
Nicely done.
Thank you very much.
Now,
Hate this game.
That was a good category. They went back and forth a lot. That was
I think those are better when people actually know them. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining today. I hope everybody out there enjoyed this episode. We'll be back with another episode of Placeholders next week. Make sure you check out all the other pods. We've got Geek Warning, we've got Wheel Talk, and of course, our brand new members only podcast, Performance Process, where you can find out how to save 22 watts without going to a wind tunnel in the most recent episode. If you are not already a member, head over to escapecollective.com/join so you can get that pod. All right, we'll be back next week. Bye, everybody.